Good evening, objects. A right royal welcome and a Republican g'day to World Series Debating Round 3, which is part of the Canberra Comedy Summit, a tautology of the year. Tonight we debate the national and emotional, but still notional motion that Australia needs the royal family. If we needed our own royal family, folks, this motley crew wouldn't be it. Take a look at the warring family factions. His royal shortness. King Andy Pandy the half-randy. Versus wayward Wendy the steadily unready. Lynham the Lionheart versus Turnbull the Turncoat. And Graham Richardson versus Bronwyn Bishop. The Terminator with a blowwave meets Thomasina the tank engine on Her Majesty's service. In his play, The Critic, Sheridan wrote the line, "No scandal about Queen Elizabeth, I hope." That was in 1779. He spoke too soon. Over 200 years too soon. But this debate has been raging for nearly as long. In 1859, an exasperated Queen Victoria confessed in a letter, "I am sick of all this horrid business of politics and Europe in general, and I do think you'll hear of me going with the children to live in Australia." 40 years on, A.G. Stevens may not have spoken for all Australians when he described the Queen as simply a fat little, dumpy little, old little woman. Nowadays, we're a little more respectful. In David Ireland's novel, The Glass Canoe, one character charmingly remarks, "She's not a bad little thing, the Queen. I wish the sluts round here could hold their grog as well." So much for the loyal toast. According to Mark Twain, all kings is mostly rapscallions. So are a few reporters. Is Paul Lynham one of them? Is the Pope a Catholic? Is Mike Willesee responsible? According to usually unreliable sources, Paul's been with the ABC since whenever he says he has, and has reportedly been our Canberra correspondent for even longer. He's now seen on the 7:30 report potently and portentously pillorying powerless pollies within an inch of their shelf life. On his own shelf is the book of his life, Political Speak, wherein he defines paranoia as when Senator Richardson sends you a get well card. It can only get better. To open the case for the affirmative that Australia does need the royal family, Paul Lynham.
Ladies and gentlemen, highly esteemed, perceptive, intelligent, and extremely handsome moderator. Distinguished toilers in the vineyard of truth on my right, the mindlessly destructive and duplicitous iconoclastic rabble on my left. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologise. On behalf of World Series Debating, on behalf of the ABC General Manager, David Mountain, indeed on behalf of the entire board of the ABC and their nursing staff, for they all share your bitter disappointment, your deep regret at the performance to which you're about to be subjected tonight by the forces of darkness and destruction. The first attack by the trifecta of darkness will come from young Bligh, Malcolm Bligh Turnbull, to be precise. governor of the burgeoning Turnbull Empire, the man who paid his way through law school with a part-time job repossessing pacemakers. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Bligh, or Excellency as he's known to his friends, is a Republican of peculiar stridency. Indeed, such stridency that one wonders about its origins. Do we trace it back to his early years at the Sydney Bar, creeping along Phillip Street in wig and gown like a refugee from the gay Mardi Gras, in the shadow of eminent Queen's Counsel? Or should we pin the blame on a frustrated political career? A young man pleading in vain for a safe Liberal seat, while octogenarian pre-selection committees sat dreaming of king and country as they grazed on Mogadon sandwiches and lamingtons. And that was just the young Liberals. We can only guess tonight at his dark and troubled thoughts as he confronts my colleague Senator Bronwyn Kathleen Bishop, that shy gentlewoman, that unassuming queen of New South Wales liberalism. And who will follow Bligh? Why, of course, Wendy Hitwoman Harmer, queen of the verbal stiletto, Australian feminism's answer to saturation bombing. Will we hear, ladies and gentlemen, from Miss Harmer any echo of sympathy or compassion towards the woman who spoke so movingly of her annus horribilis? Of course we will not. And after all, Princess Annis is probably the least horribilis of the whole bunch. All she seems to want out of life is a bag of oats and a good rub down. And then number 3. Senator Graham Mate Richardson, technical advisor to the movie Silence of the Lambs. Ladies and gentlemen, you'll recall that when the Queen was last here in the National Capital, Paul Keating touched her lightly on the back to guide her along a line of grovelling worthies. Imagine the response of the Fleet Street tabloids if the good senator had been using his delicate touch instead. Queen's arm broken in 3 places. HRH now quadriplegic. One good thing you can say about the House of Windsor is that it comes from a gene pool quite separate from that of the New South Wales right. But then most thinking primates do. So here we have them, ladies and gentlemen, Governor Bligh, Stiletto Woman and the Dungeon Master. All desperate to defy logic by convincing you that Australia does not need the royal family. Ask yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, do you not know who you are? Do you have to write little notes to yourself to remind you that you are not Bulgarian or Tongan? Have members of your family confided recently that they've been feeling unusually Brazilian or Korean? Will you be astonished when our opponents, Governor Bligh, Stiletto Woman and the Dungeon Master, deliver their malicious message tonight, not in French or German or Spanish, but in Australian English? Of course you will not. If you're a constitutional monarchist, a supporter of the system of government that has seen Australia become the 6th oldest continuous democracy in the world, a democracy that has produced such illustrious political badinage as you two-faced ferret, you vexatious geriatric, half-baked crim, brain-damaged spiv, political harlot, feral abacus and odious rodent, then you understand that our system requires a sovereign. For as long as we continue with this system, with its benefits of gentility, stability and certainty, then the monarch is an integral part of it. She is not an optional extra. According to a recent news poll, the percentage of voters in favour of cutting our constitutional links with the British monarchy has jumped from 21% back in October 87 to 46% earlier this month. Now, 46 is actually a very topical number in federal politics at the moment. It's precisely the total of votes cast for the Democrats in the recent election, and exactly twice the combined IQ of the Federal Parliamentary National Party. But I digress. 21 to 46% is a remarkable rise, but it's still far short of the clear community consensus that should be required for such an important change. Clearly, the battle for public opinion has yet to be won. How could any Republican deny that Australia needs the royal family, at least until ground zero? And after that? Well, current estimates suggest that by 2001, Australia's foreign debt could be around $400 billion. Does anyone seriously believe that by then we won't need one of the richest families in the world? Australia's business migration program should welcome them with open arms. Ladies and gentlemen, do not be deceived by the illogical and blind destroyers. However you look at it, whenever you look at it, there's no doubt at all, Australia needs the royal family. Thank you.
In the midst of the London Blitz in 1940, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, confided to a policeman, "I'm glad we've been bombed. It makes me feel I can look the East End in the face." Half a century later, the English had to face another bombing from Malcolm Bligh Turnbull, who blew a cabinet secretary deservedly into orbit during the notorious spy-catcher trial. Though a product of the establishment, Sydney Grammar, Oxford, the Australian Club, and the Loyal Society of former friends of Nick Whitlam, Malcolm has managed to combine a career as a merchant banker, I think there's a misspelling there, with a passionate devotion to the Australian Republican movement. But will he move you, be it in 8 minutes or 8 years? Time will tell. To open the case for the negative, that Australia does not need the royal family, Malcolm Turnbull.
My friends, with that sincere endorsement of royalty ringing in our ears, what can we do but adopt everything that Mr. Lynham said, except for his conclusion? We are the Republicans, and we are the patriots. That's a word the monarchists hate to hear. Patriotism, love of country. They have a love of country. But which one? They love Australia. They're passionate about Australia. They're so much in love with Australia, they care about it so much that they're not going to allow anybody except a well-bred English woman to be our head of state. None of you riffraff. Quite right too. The monarchists love those great English traditions, you know. They're traditionalists. Take Bronwyn. She has replicated every great tradition of British football hooliganism short of burning down the grandstand. And that's only a matter of time. You know, Bronwyn, a few opinion polls ago, was prepared to die in the ditch for the Queen. Now, she says she has an open mind and is prepared to hear any good argument as to why we should become a republic. But how will Bronwyn hear any argument, good or bad, if she doesn't stop talking herself? We believe Australians don't need to look up to the British monarchy as an example of public service. In this great country, amongst our great fellow Australians, there are plenty of racing enthusiasts who won't pay tax. But what would the monarchists have? They want to keep Betty Windsor as our head of state. And that's not Windsor, as in up the Windsor Road to Borkham Hills. That's Windsor, England. That's where she lives. That's where her heart is. Do you think she likes coming here? Do you think she can't wait to see Bronnie again? She hates it. And why wouldn't she? Only 30% of Australians want her as head of state. She's less popular than the GST. Now, of course, you would think that would make Bronwyn lose heart. But as we know, she had nothing to do with the GST. Fight back wasn't her idea. No, she had her gloves on, no fingerprints. In fact, apart from John Hewson, it's hard to find anyone who remembers Fight Back. You see, having had nothing to do with Fight Back, she doesn't know what it's like to back a real loser. She's going to find out tonight, my friends, because tonight we are in the company of Australians who believe that this nation is good and great enough to provide from the ranks of its own citizens, its own president, its own head of state. Now, our monarchist friends, Mr. Lynham, Senator Bishop, and the unmentionable. The traitor, I'll tell you about that in a minute, will tell you that the royal family have given us years of political stability. Well, if that is so, then we should stop being so selfish. Because we're stable already, we don't need her. We should become a republic and allow that wondrous stability-giving royal family to concentrate on their other realms. The Queen's principal realm is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. They're having a civil war in Northern Ireland, and they're letting off bombs in Great Britain. If she could get out of her occasional royal visits to Australia, those few extra days of giving stability to Belfast could make all the difference. Or what about Grenada? She's Queen of Grenada. That's a very stable place, owing to Her Majesty's preoccupation with maintaining political stability in Australia. She couldn't attend to her duties there, and the US Marines had to invade and overthrow the government. And of course there's Papua New Guinea. Her stability-giving presence is so desperately evident in Bougainville. Or what about the Solomon Islands? She's Queen there. They're about to go to war with Papua New Guinea. And remember Fiji. She hadn't been so busy stabilising Australia during the bicentennial, she could have had a tea party in Suva and stopped the coup. Jeff Kennett's another monarchist. The case rests. No. Jeff Kennett told the Italian newspaper Il Globo that the Italian Republic was a bloody disgrace, a shambles, and we'd go that way if we became a republic. I understand Jeff's feelings. He prefers the days when Italy was a monarchy under the Royal House of Savoy. There was no instability then, none of this argy-bargy democratic crap. The Italian monarchy had a stable and dependable Prime Minister, Benito Mussolini. Under our republic, the only thing which will change is our self-respect. We'll still have our parliamentary system, God help us. We'll still have our wonderful system of justice, but instead of having the Queen's representative at Yarralumla, will have a genuine representative of the Australian people. You can see already the strain imposed on Bill Hayden by having to live this terrible lie of pretending to be an emissary of Britain. Consider the anguish and torment that provoked his exaggerated displays of Australian sentiment. I entirely agreed with his refusal to engage in fox hunting. But spotlighting skippies from the vice-regal veranda... Well, after the Republic, he won't have to prove he's an Aussie. The presidency of Australia will be open to any citizen, regardless of their religion, their sex, their colour, their place of birth, even their height. Bronwyn, you could be president. So could Andrew or even Paul. The only thing you would have to do is earn the respect and admiration of the Australian people. The Australian people know that the destiny of this country lies with themselves, not with the Queen thousands of miles away. They have enough respect for themselves to recognise that their future is in their own hands. And they recognise that the Republic is not a diversion, it's not a fantasy. It's as important as saying, I am an Australian, this is my native land, this is the land I love.
Quoth Hamlet, the very late Prince of Denmark, after cross-examination by Malcolm Turnbull, thus was I, sleeping by a brother's hand, of life, of crown, of queen at once dispatched. Shakespeare also wrote in Henry IV, thy tongue makes Welsh as sweet as ditties highly penned, sung by a fair queen in a summer's bower with a ravishing division to her lute. And so to Bronwyn Bishop. As with the royal family, it's hard to know where to start. Bronwyn started as a law student at the University of Sydney, joined the Killara Young Liberals in 1961, became a senator in 87, and by the end of last year had assiduously worked all the way back down again to the bottom, nay, the very pits of the Senate Estimates Committee. Did I hear mention of the Spanish Inquisition? For 5 years, Bronwyn was a hard-working shadow minister. Now, thanks to Dr. Hewson, she's a lurking shadow without a cabinet position. To continue the case for the affirmative, Bronwyn Bishop.
Mr. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, you have just heard an outstanding speech from Mr. Paul Lynham. You have had him put a logical, sensible, dealing quite adequately with the opposition, speech that would sway any heart that came into this place thinking that we didn't need the royal family. You have heard from Malcolm what you always hear from Malcolm. You see, the nice thing about Malcolm that's always consistent is that he never lets the facts get in the way of a good story. Long and hard have we debated. Often have we debated. And Malcolm always tries to prove he's the better Australian. But you see, he hasn't got a mortgage or a monopoly on the right to call himself Australian and proud. But he does have a penchant for polls. And he quoted there that 70% of all Australians wanted to be a republic. Poll-driven is our Malcolm. But you see, I was only going to point out that the other day, just before that 13th of March date. I was going to say I read a poll too. It said John Hewson was going to win. But you see, in all societies, there are some who are prone to revolution. And when you have revolutionary plotters, you have pretenders. And who are these pretenders and who are the legitimate players? Now, on stage, we have Her Majesty the Queen, Queen of Australia. But waiting in the wings, we have the court in waiting. The would-be King Paul I and Queen Anita, ably attended by Governor Bligh, a full plenipotentiary. Stiletto Woman, the lady-in-waiting, and Graham Richardson, anxious... I think this looks like the battle for the Royal Order of the Shoe. But as I was saying, Graham Richardson over here, a member of the court, he's anxious to be relieved from his task of prowling the dungeons. And he's going to play the role of court jester. The sort of Rigoletto of the New South Wales Right. And dare I say, another to serve in this court is none other than Trevor Boucher, back from Paris. And he's going to play the role of Sheriff of Nottingham. He's going to have his own inimitable PAYE tax system. That means pay all you earn. And he will be demanding more and more taxes from the hard-pressed people to fulfill the whims of the king. And of course, the king would be entitled to be treated differently from ordinary folk, particularly in the matter of taxes. After all, why should a would-be king, why should he have to pay his taxes on time? After all, when he's your actual king, he can indulge in the royal prerogative and not pay any taxes at all. What did he say? You've got me? But of course, there are more than one pretender. And indeed, I'm reminded of the occasion, the first occasion on which I debated Governor Bligh. Unlike this auspicious occasion, it was on commercial television. And several days later, I was attending the opening night of a film based on the life of Dame Joan Sutherland. And it was a distinguished audience. Gough Whitlam was sitting behind me. And just prior to the film beginning, a lady came up to me and she said, "Senator, I saw that debate and I agree with you." She said, "We don't need a republic, we don't need a president, but if we do, we'd like you for president." At that very moment, I felt a hand descend on my shoulder from behind, and a voice said, "I think she's confused you for me." But another pretender got it wrong too. So the story goes, Bob Hawke, when he was but Prime Minister, he rang the Queen and said, "I'd like you, Your Majesty, to declare Australia a kingdom and me the king." The Queen, it is said, quietly demurred and said she thought Australia should remain as it is, a country. But does anyone really know what the proposals for a republic entail? I think Paul hopes not. Then he can turn it into anything he wants with all the regal trappings. Not quite Versailles, but he might commission Warren Anderson to build the castle. Clearly, there is no doubt at all that we need a royal family. The only thing in doubt is, do we want King Paul I? And I remember that there's a wise old Bohemian saying, and that is, you can praise a swine as much as you like, even put a golden crown on its head, but it will remain a swine and nothing more. To republic or not republic? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of would-be kings and banana republics, or take arms against a sea of troubles and by opposing end them. And by the way, no one has ever heard of a banana monarchy.
I must from this enchanting queen break off. 10,000 harms more than the ills I know my idleness doth hatch. Antony and Cleopatra. Don't know why I threw that in. From 10,000 harms to a single harmer. That's why I threw it in. Wendy's own family is far from the royal family, and a good thing too. Forsaking a fortune as the Duchess of Going Dutch and Canberra's princess of porno comedy videos, she's rapidly become a queen of the airwaves. But that other queen, no way, or at least out of harm's way. Wendy Harmer.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Moderator, Senator Bishop. Bronnie, what a heroic speech that was. Bronnie models herself on Margaret Thatcher, you know. You can see Bronwyn as a modern Queen Boadicea, can't you? Topless, face painted blue on rollerblades. Brave, brave Bronnie. You can see you've got to be brave and courageous to dump on your parliamentary leader after he's lost an election. Bronwyn, that quaint and old-fashioned confection of sentiments takes me back to when I was a small girl. And I guess, like most little girls, I daydreamed at my school desk on drowsy February afternoons, and I dreamed of being a princess when I grew up. Prince Charlie didn't ever come and knock on the door of my humble dwelling in the farthest corner of the Magic Kingdom. What a shame. Who knows? Now I could be an unemployed single mother with 2 young kids. Living on handouts from the in-laws. The question tonight, let's get back to the question at hand. Do we need the royal family? Now, some of the people here tonight, the friends over here, will be urging you to look beyond the individual transgressions of the family members and consider the benefits of the monarchy as an institution. But of all the institutions there are, the monarchy is the most personal. It is, by definition, a family. So let's just have a look at this family, shall we? A bunch of no talent, loony, bloodthirsty layabouts of questionable sexuality with IQs that need watering twice a day. A family tree, this is more like a noxious weed. This is an outfit who make the Addams family look like the Brady Bunch. Let's begin with the Williams, shall we? Who would you rather sit next to at a family reunion? William Rufus, shot with an arrow through the throat by one of his toy boys while out hunting stag? Or perhaps William of Orange, responsible for the slaughter of millions of Irish? And at Christmas time, what would you give the Henry who has everything? A life in exile, most probably. There's Henry II, who locked up his wife for 11 years to have it off with a woman 20 years his junior. Henry IV and Henry VII, who murdered their cousins. Henry VI, well, he'd come in handy at Christmas time since he was stark raving mad and thought he was Jesus Christ most of the time. Or perhaps Henry VIII. He certainly had the size and the whiskers to play Santa Claus, but you'd take your life in your hand sitting on his knee. That's if you could bear the smell from his advanced syphilis. Even his doctors couldn't in the end. Stick with me, just beginning. Which Edward would you rather at your 21st birthday party? Edward I could light the candles since he burned Scotland to the ground 3 times. You'd be wise not to let Edward IV near the bar since he drowned his own brother in a vat of Madeira. Edward VIII, well, he wouldn't get through immigration since he abdicated with Wallace Simpson, who on seeing his extremely small penis is said to have remarked to one of his girlfriends, "Frankly, my dear, my nails are longer." At least in the current Prince Edward, you'd have someone qualified to lead the game of charades. Now, I have to admit the Royal Georges could be fun at a family wedding. George IV, arguably the drunkest king in British history, so fat he had to be hoisted onto his horse by crane. And what a choice of speech makers. You've got George I, an ugly German who never spoke a word of English in his life, and had a disease which made him drink blood and grow hairs on the back of his hands. Funny old Uncle George. George II, a madman who used to talk to trees, actually. And after a spot of particularly bad advice from a stand of elms, he lost America. And as for the royal women, why not put old Mary I, alias Bloody Mary, in charge of the smorgasbord? That's if you fancy your Protestants char-grilled. And then there's the unamused Queen Victoria. She'd spend most of her days putting trousers on the dogs and long johns on the piano legs. The best that can be said of the present monarch and her offspring is that they are breathtakingly dull. Princes Charles, Andrew, Edward, the worst you can say is that these boys are just bad in bed. Someone's got to say it. I mean, it's not their fault. You know, you can't have playboys or penthouses in Buckingham Palace. How much can you learn about sex from looking at a Gainsborough? You can just see old Phil the Greek teaching them about sex, can't you? All right, boys, gather round, gather round. Charles, come and sit down. There's a few words from Charles. And Andrew. Edmund, would you take your mother's tiara off? Right, boys, well, when one approaches Her Majesty from 10 paces behind, with one's hands firmly folded behind one's back, no wonder Fergie thought toe kissing was exotic. And not a lot of sex happening in the royal family at the moment. I don't know how the Windsor Castle burned down. I'll tell you one way it didn't burn down. That's from a post-coital cigarette. Not unless Princess Anne was staying over. And Princess Di, she's going to commit suicide with a lemon slicer. What's she going to do? Peel herself to death? If she was serious, there's a number of ways she could go about it. She could inspect the Royal Marines dressed in an IRA balaclava. She could go away with Charles for the weekend to the country disguised as a fox. She could put meaty bites down her underwear and call the corgis. Prince Charles, the future King of England, has visions. Oh, yes, many of them too. Ambitions. but none so grand as those of his forebears. At the moment, the most he sees himself as being is a tampon endlessly swirling in the toilet bowl of life. To finish up, what do we owe England? You're talking about a country which once conquered half the world, but whose only recent foray into the stage of international affairs has been to send a stupid fat prince in a helicopter to defend the Falkland Islands. Only the English would think a god-forsaken pile of rocks at the bottom of the world inhabited by inbred goat herders who spend their lives Morris dancing and knitting fair old jumpers was worth dying for. You're talking about a country which has a greengrocer's daughter as its longest-serving Prime Minister, a woman related to Nazis as its monarch, Fergie is a fashion plate, an heir to the throne whose ears are so big they cause avalanches, Eddie the Eagle as its Olympic team. And then they have the gall to think of themselves as superior. Exactly who the English are superior to, ladies and gentlemen, remains an international mystery. Ladies and gentlemen, the Windsors, or more properly, the Battenberg, Saxe, Coburg Gothas, are a family you would shift suburbs to avoid. We shifted hemispheres. When next they visit uninvited asking about the spare room, let's just hide behind the curtain and pretend we're not home.
When asked what he actually did for a living, Prince Philip jovially replied, self-employed. To describe our next speaker as self-employed would be a bit rich. Like Prince Charles, he just comes and talks to the plants, really. To quote the American theatre critic Eugene Field, he plays the king as though under momentary apprehension that someone else is about to play the ace. All in all, quite a card. And kings are trumps. Deal him a hand. Andrew Denton.
Paul Lynham suggested that these people here, this team of corgi baiters, may in fact be part of the human gene pool, and indeed they are, but if they are certainly from the shallow end. Not for one moment have they stopped to consider the tragic ramifications that the removal of the royal family would have on this country. One instance, the impact it would have on the effective health of women in Australia. As time goes by, less and less royal stories would appear in women's magazines. Faced with this sudden void, the editors would go for their surefire standby of dietary articles. Eventually, sent mad by this dieting frenzy foisted upon them, half of Australia's women would simply disappear. And yet the Dungeon Master, our Minister for Health, is happy to sit by and watch this happen. Minister for Health? More like 1 million calories in search of a human being. Bronwyn, dear Bronwyn, the beehive of truth. The shoulder pads of integrity. Bronwyn was so right when she painted these people as the royal court in waiting. Look at them. Look at them. So smart, aren't they? If you don't think for a moment that Governor Bligh and Stiletto Woman here don't fancy themselves as big chances to end up on the A side of our currency when we give the Queen the flick, think again. And yet, these same self-seeking, self-serving, self-proclaimed patriots have the gall to say that we are not Australian, that we do not believe in a strong Australian identity. Well, how dare you? Oh, this makes me mad. I share the same vision for an independent and healthy Australia in the international community as your government does, Dungeon Master. That's why I still sit in the section of Qantas you didn't sell to British Airways. That's why I still eat the few Arnott's biscuits left you didn't float to Campbell's. That's why I still read those few articles in Fairfax papers not owned by Conrad Black, and that's why I go home at night as you do in cabinet meetings, shut my eyes and repeat the mantra, Rupert really is an Australian. Rupert really is an Australian. Don't give me national identity, Sirrah. I know national identity. That's what beer ads are for, Malcolm. You wouldn't know beer unless it was 200 years old and cost a fortune, would you? And it's because I know our national identity, and damn it, I love this country, that I get a bit emotional on occasions like this, because I look around at what should be a great nation, but a nation whose only growth industry is unemployment. A nation which, as Paul said, will have a national debt by the year 2001 of $400 billion. That's a lot of money. That's more than Kerry Packer bets in a year. And unless some miracle happens, unless the Japanese decide to buy us as a present for their kids, we're going to be totally down the tubes by the turn of the century. I'm so emotional about this at the moment. The correct response to a $400 billion national debt is not to spend more money chucking the royals out. The correct response is to import them. You see, they have entirely missed the point of this debate. The royal family is not about politics. The royal family is about show business. And it will not be expensive to import them. Trust me, after 8 more years of the tabloids, the royal family will be trying to tunnel out of England. So stupid they don't even know a tunnel's already there. And once we have them here, it will be the entrepreneurial coup of the century. Think about it. Millions coming from all around the world to see the new Australian royal family, to watch the changing of the guard right here outside the gates of the new royal residence, number 42A, Ramsay Street. Because audaciously, as a masterstroke, we will put the two great soapies of our time together, Neighbours and Windsors. This thing will work, believe me. We'll have Liz and Phil at 42A, Charles and Di on one side, Fergie and Andrew on the other, and if the Queen Mum's still around, we'll bung her in an A.V. Jennings retirement home where she can be a very proud old empire builder. The potential of this thing is scary, but it doesn't end there. You see, I firmly believe that ultimately Australia's only salvation will be to turn itself into a gigantic royal theme park. It is true that politically monarchies are on the decline all over the world, but as an object of public fascination and makers of cold hard cash, they are unrivaled. Look at America. They fought an entire bloody war to rid themselves of the royal family, and now they're utterly obsessed with creating their own. You know the story, Camelot, the Kennedys, Jack and Bobby tragically killed, Teddy horribly left alive. Look at Spain, they brought back their king, and what happens? 10 years later, they get the Olympics. Take note, Sydney. The subject tonight is that Australia needs the royal family. But which one? I say to you that we should throw open our borders to the royals of every land. If we must have boat people, let's have the ones that are loaded. Millions of tourists from all over the world come to see their former heads of state. And what can they do in a single day for a nominal fee? They can go down the replica hill where Prince Rainier of Monaco was disgraced. They can gawk at the sight of the King of Tonga and Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands hand in hand for their regular 4 o'clock photo opportunity. The kiddies can be photographed between those wacky royals from Luxembourg and Liechtenstein. And then, when you leave Windsorland, you may care to donate $1 or $2 to our audacious program, our intensive program, to try and get Prince Edward to breed in captivity. This is my dream. It's so big, perhaps too big, but damn it, we voted for Paul Keating. Logic isn't high on our list of priorities. Is this dream too big for you, you pointless, petty, grey men and women with your politics? Then step aside, because it's not too big for these people. I know you share my dream. An Australia of opportunity with a royal on every corner and enough tourist dollars to make everyone rich. It'll be so beautiful. Does Australia need the royal family? I say to you emphatically, yes!
Great moment. The Earl of Rochester penned this fanciful epitaph for Charles II. Here lies a great and mighty king whose promise none relies on. He never said a foolish thing, nor ever did a wise one. To which the good King Chiller pithily penned back, "This is very true, for my words are my own, and my actions are my ministers." For a decade now, Senator Graham Richardson has been a hyperactive minister. He was well trained as a child. His nickname was the Skull. He was the only kid in Kogarah who wore a black leather jacket to kindergarten. And in primary school, his very first reader was Machiavelli's The Prince. Well, not quite. But even on those rare occasions when he hasn't had the numbers, he's still had a healthy respect for them. Fittingly, he's now the respected Minister for Health. But if you fall sick and you haven't got the numbers, brother, he'll king hit you, just after he's king hit the king. To conclude the case for the negative, hey presto, it's the kingmaker himself, King Hoppo, Bumpo, Domino, Macho, Boffo, Richo.
Thank you, Campbell. It's good to see you playing yourself. I know that it is said one should never follow kids or animals. I'm following Andrew. I'm following both. Now, I started to think about tonight, this afternoon, and I had to wonder very quickly whether or not I should come here at all. You see, I actually looked up the Constitution of Australia, which is not something any of you did today, I'll bet. And Section 64 says that I am the Queen's Minister of State for the Commonwealth. And Section 66 says something far more profound. It says, and I quote, "There shall be payable to the Queen out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund of the Commonwealth for the salaries of Ministers of State an annual sum." It goes on to say it shall not exceed £12,000, but we got it over that. One never lets the Constitution get in the road too often. So I had a look at this, and I said to myself, "You're in strife, Richo. You work for it, and any salary paid to you gets paid to her first to get paid to you, and tonight I have to tell you why we don't need her. And it gets worse. Section 64 of the Constitution also says that I hold office during the Governor-General's pleasure. Bit of a worry, that, I thought. Now, I've given Bill Hayden plenty over the years, not much of which he'd describe as pleasure. Anyway, Bill, mate, I know that you'll square it off for me with her. I know you'll do that for all the memories. Now, well, Bill and I are... Last century, when I last talked to Bill, Walter Bagshot, whoever the hell he was, said that to protect the monarchy, it was not important to let daylight in on magic. The last couple of years, someone let the sun shine in on the House of Windsor. And so now, you've heard it all. We've listened to the taped conversations, and yes, I want to make a public confession, a sincere admission that I bought your idea. There it is, it's on record. I wanted to look at the photographs. Now, and I looked, and well, the breasts of a princess were something I never thought I'd see. And does Australia need them, dare I ask? In any event, who says that Australia needs a royal family anyway? Mostly they're defended by the Liberal and National parties and their media flunkies like Lynham and Denton. And it's not hard to see why they'd defend them. I mean, there are certain similarities between the opposition and members of the royal family. For a start, they're not supported by 50% of the Australian people. And Her Majesty and John Hewson share a belief in the importance of paying tax. And they have both recently agreed to do so. And Andrew Peacock, you'd have to concede, bears a striking resemblance to Prince Charles. Both have been waiting around for years, hoping to do something useful. They've each gotten themselves into trouble using car phones. I mean, Andrew was talking to Jeff Kennett. Fortunately, he didn't express a desire to come back as the inside of his trousers. Well, that'd be a pretty sticky place to be at the moment. And in any case, it was the only position John Howard could beat him to. Like the royal family, the Liberals have just endured an annus horribilis. In fact, they've had quite a few Annie Horribili. But perhaps they cling to the royal family because they cling to the idea of the empire. They want to go back to the golden age of Menzies. It was Sir Robert who uttered arguably the most embarrassing line of any Australian Prime Minister. It was at a royal reception in 1965 when he quoted that incredibly famous, very well-known 16th century poet Barnaby Googe. when he said, "I did but see her passing by, and yet I love her till I die." It doesn't get much more sickening than that, does it? And he said that in front of his wife. Now, look, I feel more qualified to speak on the issue than any of the people here anyway, because it's a well-known fact that as far as the royal family and I are concerned, well, of course, we're mates. No, well, I mean, I think it's well known when they're out here. We get together for a chat, meal, a few beers. We are close. 'Twas 1988 aboard the Royal Yacht Britannia, when I was with friends, but for a quiet dinner. There were a few Queensland National Party ministers with us at the time. They can't be with us tonight. They couldn't get day leave. It was at that dinner, or thinking about it, that I thought about what's really happening in tonight's debate. Because the primary function of the royal family today is to fill our magazines and newspapers with pictures and transcripts of good, solid, juicy scandal. But I ask you, do we need to import scandals? Aren't we more than capable of producing our own? We've had Primrose... We've had Primrose jilted at the altar in Venice by a prince who lives with another bloke. We've got Pixie and Christopher on the beach in Mallorca. We've got Bronwyn Bishop punching out our tax commissioner on national television. We've got a father of quads who left home with the night nurse. Ladies and gentlemen, these are high-quality scandals. These bombs don't hold a candle to us, indeed. Sylvania Waters has just been shown on the BBC. No family is better at scandals than that one, and while I discount rumours that there have been moves in senior diplomatic circles for a straight swap, I do know that Noeline and Laurie are leaving Sylvania, and who knows where their journey may end. So I simply leave it to you to judge. You can judge this tawdry, cheap theatric show over here, or the rich sincerity that comes from my left. And I tell you what, I've never got much of it from my left. And finally, does a nation that can send the South Melbourne football team to become the Sydney Swans need to look elsewhere for heroes? No, ladies and gentlemen, our heroes are all around us. They're homegrown, they're Australian, and long may they reign.
He once told Playboy, "Politics is all I've done, all my working life. This is all I'm good for." I don't think so. Why not leave the political stage, sir, and take up acting seriously? Now, if the summings up are not short enough, as Elizabeth I warned, I shall make you shorter by a head. For the affirmative, like Henry V, royal captain of this ruined band, Andrew Denton, followed immediately and without warning for the negative by the living proof of Lord Mansfield's dictum, all men are born equal, but quite a few eventually get over it. Malcolm Turnbull.
Governor Bligh came up here with an extraordinary number of bits of paper. Now, what are these, Governor Bligh? As I suspected, they're press releases about himself. Governor Bligh here criticised Bronwyn Bishop's open mind. I can't think why. Governor Bligh has an extremely open mind. Any number of stupid ideas seem to be capable of lodging there. He suggested that we don't want an Australian head of state. Untrue, sir. A falsehood. Of course we want an Australian head of state. Part of the grand plan of Windsorland is that we will crossbreed Packers and Fairfaxes with the royal stock. And Stiletto Woman spent a lot of time several hundred years back in history, which at least was a bit more recent than some of her jokes. She seemed to be speaking to a long-dead audience, which many of us were by the end of her talk. And predictably, she had a very, very long go at the royal family. In response to
the debate, wasn't it?
Yes, no, the subject of the debate was whether Australia needs the royal family, not their personal habits. And I leave you, Wendy, with this fabulous quote from the late Somerset Maugham.
Oh, good.
Yes, there is hardly anybody. You probably haven't heard of him, he writes. There is hardly anybody, Wendy, whose private life, if it were broadcast to the world at large, would not fill the world at large with surprise and horror. Bear that in mind the next time the tabloids have a go at you. And then the Dungeon Master. Unbelievably brought up Sir Robert Menzies yet again. For Pete's sake, Dungeon, the guy's dead. Let him go. Now, tonight, I expect you'll be voting against the royal family and for the Republic, because it is trendy to be Republicans and passé to be royal. But remember, what is trendy today, tomorrow will be passé and vice versa. So why not be trendy ahead of your time? And vote for the royal family, because if you don't, you're going to force me to do something I'd rather not do. You see, Bronwyn Bishop? Now, beneath that carefree, happy exterior, Bronwyn Bishop is an angry woman. And you may be right if you thought that it's sheer anger that holds Bronwyn's hair up like this. But it is not, because only now can I reveal to you that this is not hair, but 12 pounds of plastic explosive. There is a pin here on top which I will pull out. And it will take out all of us, this whole building, and the only thing that will save us is if Paul Lynham selflessly throws himself on top of Bronwyn. And I don't think he's going to do that, do you? The choice is yours.
You know, when the Queen watches this, she's going to do one thing. Join the Republican movement. Can you imagine committing your fortune, your dynasty to these people as their defenders? Did they utter one word in the defence of the royal family? Of course not. They rubbished it and scorned on it. They scorned us. Bronwyn was the only one that departed from the theme. She attacked the Prime Minister. But Bronwyn, you didn't have to attack Paul. John Hewson's back from holidays. Oh, and don't you love the idea of the royal family saving our commercial problems? I think that's great. They're so good at business. I mean, look at them. Look at them. They put the torch into Windsor Castle. It wasn't even insured. Who'd do that? It's un-Australian. You know, we are not just the party of right, we're the party of honesty. And we are going to reveal, as I foreshadowed earlier, my friends, that Andrew Denton is a traitor. He poses as a royalist. He's in fact a Republican mole, but his tactics are so disgusting that we are now going to abandon him. He shames even Richo. Andrew passed himself off as a friend to the royal family. Passed himself off as a friend. They know they're in trouble in Australia. For God's sake, they've only got John Howard and Bronwyn on their side. How much trouble can you get? And so Andrew, the great writer, went over there to see Charles.
Andrew, I want to be able to say something to Camilla. Something that is really unique. Something romantic. A scrap of verse. A little phrase. Something no one else has ever said.
Righto, Gov, he said. Well, we know the rest. Swirling away. We don't need that. We've got the people on our side. Just a straight Australian approach. That's all we ask for. Tonight is important. It's not entirely a joke. Remember, it may not be their country, but it's certainly ours.
Well, do we need the royal family? The nation's fate, our sense of destiny, and our very survival hang in the balance. Let us be decisive. Tonight, you've got to sing your hearts out. Those in favour of the affirmative argument will, at the count of 3 from me, sing the first line only of God Save the Queen. 1, 2, 3.
God save our gracious Queen.
Thank you. And those against the motion are to sing the first line of Advance Australia Fair lustily after 3. 1, 2, 3. Australians will lay our fingers for Thank you. Well, there's very little in it. But, frankly, I think we'll have to award it to the negative. Let the former royal family, for such it now is, take this anonymous epigram to heart. Most gracious Queen, we thee implore to go away and sin no more. But if that effort be too great, to go away at any rate. And so shall we, at least until all this needless fuss has died down. Again, for now. Good night.
The Debate is Laughter Better Than Sex, featuring Andrew Denton, is available from ABC shops and centres. This Sunday in True Stories, a revealing backstage look at American comedian Roseanne Arnold and her ever-changing scriptwriters. Can situation comedy be a cutthroat business? Find out in Feeding the Monster, Sunday night at 8:30. Coming up, Attitude.